Hi guys, it's Brooke here. I have a super quick favor to ask. When you have a moment, please take just a second to give this podcast a 5-star review. This will help me to continue the podcast and continue to bring these resources to the community. Thank you so much for that 5-star review.
I hope everyone listening does own the fact that you do belong. You are invited. And I don't make light of the fact I know people have experienced trauma. I don't think we can gloss over that, Brooke, you know? We've experienced painful things. I know others have experienced real trauma in the environment where they should most have been able to trust others and to trust and support. And that's so painful when that happens. And I think being kind to ourselves as we
Mhm.
heal from that is really important. And, whether we're seeking out a counselor to talk us through that trauma, or whether we're, being willing to allow ourselves to take really small steps forward. And I'm sure you have other things to add to that, but I think being kind to ourselves is a good starting place.
Hi, guys. I'm really excited to talk about today's episode. Today, we're going to be talking about faith-based inclusion, and I had the privilege of meeting our guest, Lisa Maloney, at our annual RDI conference back in the fall of 24, and she presented on this topic at the conference, and I just found it to be so insightful and also really important. I think that it is our right and is part of our well-being in life to feel like we're part of a community, to feel like we have a spirituality. I personally feel that I live so much by my own Christian faith, and I just really appreciated Lisa's take on this and how she supports her own daughter, who she does RDI with, and she's also an RDI consultant. So she comes with a wealth of knowledge and experience and understanding of how to create competent roles and really slow things down so her own daughter and clients can be successful in these types of settings. And what really stood out to me is that Lisa is now offering consult to church-based communities on how they can provide a more inclusive setting for their special needs and neurodiverse population that attends their ministries. So I thought that was so great, and I'm glad that she was able to come on and share a bit more about that as well. And we'll certainly have her contact information in our show notes and in the episode, and I hope you enjoy this wonderful episode. All right. Well, today I'm so excited to have this conversation. This has just been something I've been really looking forward to. And we're going to be talking about faith-focused inclusion. And it's something that has been near and dear to my heart and something I've been learning about over the years. And I had the wonderful blessing of hearing from our guest this year at a presentation. And she's going to share a little bit more with us today about how she capulates or how she works on a faith-based inclusion program. And so welcome, Lisa. I'm going to go ahead and read your bio, and then we're going to get into this topic. So today we have Lisa Maloney, and she earned a Bachelor of Science degree in psychology from Abilene Christian University and a Master's of Arts degree in professional counseling from Texas Wesleyan University, where she was deeply influenced by the narrative and solution-focused approaches to healing and change. After graduating, she abandoned her path to licensure as a counselor in order to implement a home-based education program for her daughter, diagnosed with autism at age 2. And Lisa has been an RDI parent for 9 years, which is Relationship Development Intervention. And in 2023, she completed her training under Dr. Shealy's supervision to become an RDI program certified consultant. And now Lisa works collaboratively with each family she serves to create a distance RDI program that is individualized for each family's unique strengths and challenges. So welcome, Lisa.
Oh, thank you, Brooke. I am just so excited about this conversation. I've been really looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Well, I had, the honor of hearing you speak at our RDI annual conference and just was so grateful that you were invited to speak and shared all the amazing work that you're doing and shared about your story as well. And so I'd love to get us started with having our listeners hear just a little bit about your story and your beautiful family, and, have you just take a second to share a bit more.
Oh, I would love to. And that was such a privilege, Brooke. I enjoyed that conversation so much. And I just can't wait to continue it with you today. Our family, so I have twins. They are 14 and a half. And, two teenagers in the house. It is crazy every day, but we have so much fun together as a family. I've been married to my husband for 27 years, and he has been a full-time minister for the last 20-ish of years. And so I give you that backstory to try to help you understand why this subject is so personal and so important to our family. We had such a surprise when we found out we were having twins, boy and a girl. But even before, even before they were born, while we were still in utero, there was just this first little shadow concern about my daughter's. She had kidney reflux, and it was a congenital vesicoureteral reflux. She had bilateral. It was the worst grade. And that little shadow grew into a bigger and bigger problem in her first couple years of life. I mention that because when we have these coexisting conditions, alongside our development, it can make for a very confusing situation. So by the time she was 2 years old, she had had a major surgery to correct things. She had been on prophylactic antibiotics for 2 years with increasingly powerful antibiotics used to keep these infections in place. In spite of all of that, she, went through her 18-month screening. There was no thought at that time that she had any kind of neurodiversity or that there was any kind of a diagnosis such as autism spectrum disorder in her future. But that's exactly what we had by the time she was 2. After she'd had this surgery, she had a very difficult recovery. Then she had difficulty with her language development, and then had this diagnosis, which was a surprise to our family when she was 2 years old. So having been to school, I had just, graduated with my master's, and I thought, you know what? I studied about this in school, and I thought I knew what to do. So we went into our educational program, and we started with ABA. It wasn't until she was 5 years old that, through a family friend, we found Dr. Sheely, and were connected with her and learned about the relationship development intervention approach. And that approach just blew everything open for us. It really transformed our approach, our way of thinking about educating Ellie and her growth, and my son, not just Ellie. And so all these things came together to really change the course of our journey. We began to work with Kat Lee, our consultant, and we still in a process with her. And everything began to change for us in how we came to life together as a family and the things we prioritized. And all along the way, of course, I had the benefit of feeling a sense of belonging because of being connected to someone with a role, even a paid role in our community of faith. And so there was no chance of me in that. And I think this is a blessing in my life, that I couldn't be peripheral, not really, and yet, like many families who, are in a community of faith, there were days where I went home from church early with my daughter, and she had had a hard day, and we had obstacles together, and we went home both crying. And, there's, I think, so much pain, Brooke, when that place that we know we most should feel like we belong and should be most welcome. And it means so much to us. We love our faith communities and want so much to belong ourselves and for all members of our family to have a place. And yet sometimes there are obstacles to that feeling, to having that sense of belonging. And so I feel so passionate about every person in our family, belongs with us in those contexts of faith. And I also think sometimes that there can still be a lot of difficulty and challenge inherent in how do we accomplish, that as a parent, as a guide, how do we guide our children into spiritual growth? And even alongside obstacles, we have had only in the last few years, as things have, as Ellie's development has progressed, have we had the blessing of hearing her voice begin to develop, beginning to say mommy and daddy. And I joke that I'm not bitter that she said daddy first, but mommy came later. But, hearing her reciprocate with us verbally, the verbal channel has been and continues to be a challenge for her. It's always growing, but it's still new and fresh. We still never take it for granted when we tell her good night and we hear night night, sweet dreams, or whatever, I love you. Oh, hearing those words from her, it was such a long time coming for her. And so you can imagine that sometimes there are challenges. A lot of our roles sometimes in our communities are based around language and being able to have those roles. And so, but she's capable of being in a role with our family and in community. And if we just take some time for considering how best to support her in a role that's meaningful for her. And so I really feel like we have had success, we've had failure, we've had difficulty, and we've had blessing all along the way. But I want us as a family to continue to talk with other families about this important thing, because I think there's so many of us who really do care and want the opportunity to make space for our children to belong and to support them in navigating whatever obstacles are in our way on that path. So.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love that. It's so important. You touched on so many significant pieces there. And I think it is incredibly important to support families in having that opportunity to feel like they can share in that experience with being able to participate in whatever faith that they're in, with their family and be a part of a community. And I also think, our autistic individuals as well want that too. I know I've had clients that have shared that and don't necessarily know how to integrate or feel competent. And so supporting families in the way that you are and in being a model with your own family is so significant in giving that opportunity and showing that it's so possible and can be very successful and can really bring you together. I imagine it just brings you even closer together as a family to have those shared experiences.
I think we really have to hold on to them when we have them, Brooke. I don't want to misrepresent myself in any way as being the example of success. I'm afraid that might be what that sounded like when you just said that there. Now, I will dispel that myth. But what I do think that we're willing to do is not give up, and I do want that for all of our families. I want every family to be encouraged. Please do not give up on that desire to. I do believe that, as you said, that we can find success if we don't give up. And I think, Brooke, for me, the RDI approach has really been the path. When we have found success, it has been through an RDI approach. So I do really love to talk about that because it's almost counterintuitive. Sometimes it's so simple, having simple, meaningful, authentic roles for people, looking for opportunities to create those. I think those are some of the things that it sounds like that's too small, right? That sounds like a too small place to start sometimes. And yet, those opportunities are the ones that create the space for, I think, meaningful, authentic connection within our own families, as well as in the larger family. And, we have so much that we can also do at home in terms, sometimes, especially, I will speak to people maybe who struggle with communication on the verbal channel with family members. Sometimes that happens. There's a lot of reasons why that might be. But there is so much that we can share that's not even about love, about our values, that's in the choices that we make and that we're modeling for our family when we're having these shared experiences together. We can center our experiences around our values, whether that's giving or serving or all those opportunities or just enjoying being together. I don't want to in any way diminish that most important role of just loving our time together, whatever we're doing. So
Yes. Yes, it's so true. And we're going to talk specifically about some of those roles. I know you shared some really concrete ones in your presentation, and I thought that they were so tangible and ways that especially within your church community. I loved the examples that you shared, and I think that would be a great thing to talk about so we can give our listeners some ways that you've kind of taken a look at. I remember the beading activity that you shared, and
oh, I
it
love
was a
that.
community event, and I just thought that was so special. It was such a great example of providing an opportunity to have a competent role that was meaningful, and you had a picture of it so we could visualize you were in a large group, and you had that shared experience with your daughter. So maybe we can have you just share a minute about some of those kinds of examples.
Oh, I love to. So I think what you're talking about is I had shared and this experience that my daughter and I shared together. We were fortunate to be at a church that offered mother-daughter, like a open mother-daughter activity. So you buy your ticket and you come, and it was a jewelry making activity. And so we came, but I knew that we were going to run into some skill issues. She was probably, I don't know, maybe 8, maybe about the 8 or 9 when we went to this activity. And so I knew there would be some skill issues related to the jewelry making, because sometimes those are pretty intricate. And I thought that could be frustrating. So we took time to go to the store ahead of time and pick out some things that we could do. So we brought our own jewelry making it. It was just a pipe cleaner and beads that were large enough to be, for us to both be easily successful in making some bracelets for each other. And so we brought that, we put that down on our table with other mothers and daughters. And when we did bring at that time, she was kind of on the edge. She's much more tolerant now, but at the time, being in a crowd like that for a long period of time was really fatiguing for her to continue to process and filter that out. So we did bring some headphones that she could hear me through, but that sort of dampened that. And about halfway through the event, we did go ahead and put those on. And I think that also supported her. But then what we learn with our RDI consultants is how to frame an activity that supports our special loved one. And so those things were considerations. I set the limit for her that I did want her to come to the table with me. But then whether or not she felt like she was in the mood or in the right frame of mind to participate was up to her. And I was so happy that she was absolutely ready to make some bracelets with us that day. And, I want to stress that we had a lot of events similar to this where that was much harder. And so it was a process. This moment I'm telling you about was a culmination of a process of learning how to support her and her being able to learn that she could trust me, that when she let me know that now was not the moment or that there was,
Right.
some obstacle that was in the way, that she could trust me to, defer to her need in that. And so that makes her, that over time, that made her more and more willing, I think. I wish I could ask her, but by the way that she, interacts with me, more and more willing to trust me, to lead her into situations that she'll be capable of feeling competent in, and that won't be overwhelming for her. And so anyway, it was such a fun thing, Brooke, to finally arrive at that place where we were connected to one another, and she was able to be successful. We made her little bracelets. And I do think when we have those experiences that it is so important that we hang on to them. And I really believe that they stack up for us, just like we were talking about those beads on my pipe cleaner, I think we add these experiences one to another in a process over time, and overall they begin to add up to something that's unique and meaningful for our family. And I would also say too, I think, I don't ever want to sound like I am being prescriptive in giving you these examples, because I think the DNA of every church or community of faith is different. And every family is so unique. And so this experience might be a total a misstep for you. You may not know as a parent that if you're, you may be listening and be like, well, that would never work for us. I defer to your expertness in that. I mean, our
Hmm.
parents know our children so well,
Hmm.
but I would encourage then what are the experiences that
Hmm.
might be possible? That, doing the beads, that's something we can do at home. We can have these experiences at home. But then when we also, as a church, begin, or as a community, begin to offer experiences that are not age graded, that are intergenerational, and that are open to a wide range of skill and ability, whatever our developmental age, I think that those kind of open-ended experiences really give us an opportunity to step in no matter our ability, no matter our age, And so I
Hmm.
love when churches really think about these opportunities to provide intergenerational sharing experiences. Because I think sharing
Hmm.
experiences together is a really beautiful path to sharing everything, to sharing our values, to sharing our faith together, who we
Hmm.
are together, all through these moments where there's choice and where our children have a sense, or our loved ones have a sense of agency they can offer. And
Hmm.
I want to stress too, Brooke, that I hope I don't sound like I think this is just for autistic individuals, because these are human things we need. We all, these are things that help all of us. I talk to women all the
Hmm.
time who feel they're on the fringe for whatever
Hmm.
reason, and don't feel like they're, a core participant, or like they belong in the way that they wish they did. And
Right.
I think I think all of us, for the opportunity to find roles where we're sharing experiences with other people, where we have a sense of competence, where we're
Hmm.
not overwhelmed, and, where we're part of something meaningful and with authentic purpose, especially
Hmm.
those opportunities to give and serve. I have can I share an example that one of my
Sure.
families has given me permission to share about their experience going to a place to serve, it was like a food bank. And so
Hmm.
they brought their children to serve. And immediately, this mom, who is just an expert guide, set up roles for her children of, they picked out some things that were doable. You can lift these bottles, we can move them to the sorting station. And so she looked immediately for roles that were doable and meaningful, and got both of her children involved in a role that that was understandable, and they could see themselves then as part of this meaningful activity.
Hmm.
And so I think that
Hmm.
there's, whether we're in our community with a community organization or nonprofit that we value, wherever we find ourselves serving is a great opportunity for us, I think, as parents, to convey our values and our faith, and why, those things.
Oh, I love it. I think there's so much to kind of unpack there of what you just shared. And I think you're so right in kind of taking the RDI framework and, considering those meaningful roles. And I want to talk about that because it is very individualized, as you mentioned. What works for one may not work for another. And so,
Right.
but it's something that you really can do as a parent and really kind of take into consideration. I loved how you saw that event, that opportunity to connect with your daughter, and then you really took the time to consider what would set her up for success so that she could have that meaningful and competent role where that was authentic. And, being able to just really take just that quick moment, even with your client example of walking into that food bank, maybe she didn't know the roles in advance. So she had to go in the moment and make that decision and think about how to invite her child to participate in a successful role. And I
Yeah.
think that the significance of that is that it helps the individual to feel like they are of value, that they are part of a collective whole, that they
Mhm.
matter, that
Yeah.
they have that those are huge quality of life markers that we all
For
want,
all
as
of
you
us.
mentioned, for all humans, right? And so when we keep that quality of life as the forefront, and then we bring it down to competency and success, then our beautiful children that need these supports can have those opportunities and to feel important, and also giving you then that beautiful experience together, and
So
that
fun.
shared relationship building opportunity. And I think the other piece that I like to add when families are going through that process too, in my own work, is it also gives you an opportunity to provide that really positive feedback, that you are of value. This was a shared experience, that it is meaningful for, everybody involved. And I think that helps to build what you were talking about with those, that I love that visual. I was picturing you stacking those beads and thinking, oh, this is like a representation of all these shared experiences. And maybe it's just one bead to start, but then it leads to a whole bracelet. This show is brought to you by Therapeutic Approach to Growth. Therapeutic Approach to Growth helps families with relationship and behavioral needs. Their holistic programs are individualized to honor and respect each family and their autistic son or daughter's sense of self through programs such as relationship development intervention, naturalistic ABA, and animal-assisted services. If you're finding yourself frustrated or discouraged with your current behavioral programs and would like to see more long-term meaningful growth for you and your family, then contact TAG today at www.tagforgrowth, that's TAGFORGROWTH.com, to learn more about how to schedule a consultation or how they can offer you the help your family needs, whether in person, remotely, or in a school setting. Again, that's www.tagforgrowth.com.
Right? We just continue to grow those experiences over time. And when our children experience themselves as competent in their role and have that sense of that full circle, maybe they have a moment of uncertainty and then they resolve that by being like, no, I'm with my guide. We sorted it. It's, I feel successful. That sense of success that creates such intrinsic motivation in ourselves to continue to want to connect with others and with new experiences, I think. And we grow our sense of resilience and safety through those experiences, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's such a good point because we want to have those positive memories of feeling successful. And that gives us that resilience to say, next time something feels a little uncertain, I can handle it because I did it before.
Right.
And I was able to. And that's for anybody, right, in life?
Right. We need those as parents as well. That's
Yes,
right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to add, like, I think to your point earlier, that it's okay if you try these things and it doesn't go as planned. And maybe it's
Right.
not a win for the day.
Yeah.
You regroup, you reset, you consider what you can learn from that experience. It's just
Yes.
information. And then you try again the next week, or when
Yeah.
you feel ready.
Reframe it. If you can review in your mind what might help in the future. Sometimes there's information, as you said, to be gleaned. I wish we had a camera on. I mean, some people do, I guess, but I wish we had a camera, to help us with those moments where we could like replay it and figure out how things went the way that they went and what we want to keep from that experience and try to do again, and what part we want to change that might, or tweak that might better support our child or our loved one in the future. Or if we're thinking of it, I'm talking as a parent right now, but certainly, as individuals, we can parent ourselves in this way as well, asking ourselves these questions. How can I better, what was hard about this for me? How can I better support myself to feel successful next time? And also we can ask someone we're close to that's another trusted person to help us think through that, I think, as well, don't you?
I love that idea too. I think that's a great one. Just having that reflection and that feedback. We need that when we're in the midst of these kinds of situations, trying to figure out what happened.
Yes. And I think it's good for us to remember that we're not, if we're feeling obstacles to community, we are not alone in that. That is so common to all of us. And especially if we have any kind of difference or vulnerability, which might create an obstacle for ourselves, whether, as in my daughter's case, the challenge of processing so much verbal channel from so many people at once can be really overwhelming. And so, but she's changed in that way over time. And sometimes I think we can come as a parent to these experiences or as an individual, and feel unsuccessful and think, it can't work. And
Mhm.
like that's a permanent thing. And maybe because we feel like the obstacles are permanent. And there's going to be so many, there's nothing I can do to get around this. It can be really disheartening, and we can feel like that there's no movement. But I really think for those of us who are embracing a relationship development approach, this developmental approach with an emphasis on relationship really does give us a path forward. It may be incremental. It may be one small step. I would say, think of the next step and then think of what's half a step to that, right?
Mhm.
Tiny steps. That's how we make our way. At least that's how our family has had to move forward, a half step at a time, maybe not always a full step, and sometimes we take steps back, right? And then we try again. And I think that the RDI approach offers us a way of reflecting on our experience that helps us. And sometimes we may need a third party, and we may need a consultant or a trusted person to look at it with us and to help us see, what our path forward might be. But I think it does offer us the promise and the hope for sure. But really, I think it offers us the promise of a process that continues to move toward growth and the growth of our
Mhm.
children and support our growth in ourselves and in our children. I think having an invitational mindset, like we invite, but we don't expect every activity to work for every person, but we want to provide as many invitations to a role as we can, knowing that the more we do that, the more opportunities people have to come to those roles and to accept
Mhm.
those invitations. And then how can we support our families in those roles? And
Mhm.
I think that's so individual that it really requires, when we're in our communities of faith, asking each other and also being willing to share, being willing to know and own. And I hope everyone listening does own the fact that you do belong. You are
Mhm.
invited. And I don't make light of the fact I know people have experienced trauma. I don't think we can gloss over that, Brooke, We've experienced painful things. I know others have experienced real trauma in the environment where they should most have been able to trust others and to trust and support. And that's so
Mhm.
painful when that happens. And I think that, I think being kind to ourselves as we
Mhm.
heal from that is really important. And, whether we're seeking out a counselor to talk us through that trauma, or whether we're, coming, being willing to allow ourselves to take really small steps forward. I'm sure you have other things to add to that, but I think being kind to ourselves is a good starting place.
Absolutely. I think that's so important, and I think it's, when you have those experiences of trauma, I think, as you mentioned, having that professional support to help you walk you through it, and also know that you will, because just because you had that experience does not mean that is the forever story, right?
Exactly. Yes.
You will have, if that is what you desire, you will have that opportunity to feel a part of a community and feel safe,
That's right.
and to feel supported.
Yeah.
And, it's just a matter of being resilient and working through the pain and working through the experience and knowing that you will get on the other end.
Hmm. Hmm.
And,
Absolutely.
you know, I love that you mentioned, the invitation piece, and also that you support church communities in inclusion. And I'd love to kind of talk about the types of supports that you offer and kind of what you've seen in your practice and experience with supporting church communities. We've had an amazing community here locally. We're in San Diego that has reached out to us over the years and wanting to have us help with their teen programs. And we have some really nice teen programs here. Capernaum, I think is what they're called. And our clients love them. And I'm so grateful that they have that opportunity here. I'm not sure if that's a nationwide thing or if it's more, just based on where you're at, what's available. But I'd love for you to kind of talk to, what you do in that role as a consultant. And I think it's just such a unique service, and having the RDI lens and your own family experience and the church community experience that you've had, and being able to bring that to the table, I think is unique and special.
Oh, well, I appreciate that so much, Brooke. It's actually something new I'm just offering on my website and just beginning. And I'm very interested to see what the need is and if there's a need for it. But it certainly seems like there is a place for us to maybe need as communities to talk about the roles that are available to us and how we can create simple roles, we can open up our church-wide experiences to include more people. And there's some beautiful things on the web and books that have been written by people, you know, that have so much more experience than I do, and including autistic individuals who are sharing quite beautifully and bravely about the church experiences that they have and the things that have helped them, even practical things like, changing the light bulbs to not be the kind that are flickering kind, and, ways that we can provide help and support to people who do need help managing, sensory overload sometimes, or a different way of processing information during their engagements with others. And so I do think that there's some beautiful things to be found out there. But what I hope to be able to offer to churches is an opportunity to brainstorm. Every church is or community of faith is so unique, and their DNA is so specific to them. So what works one place won't necessarily work in another. But what I would say could work everywhere if we could brainstorm the ways that the things they're already doing can become more accessible. If we can think about how to scaffold people in the things churches are already trying to do, the roles they're already offering, if we can even expand those. In our church, we have an opportunity for everyone to participate sometimes in what I would call collaborative art. We have a wonderful artist who came and allowed every person to use their fingerprint in a picture that made a larger mosaic. And so collaborative, we just recently, our church was damaged by the storms in Texas last year. And so we are just now getting back and where our auditorium is ready to hold everyone for worship. And so we invited everyone to come in and write, their name and a scripture or a blessing over that space. Well, so my daughter, and some of our other members were not able to articulate something in writing, but they were able to participate by putting their handprint there, and were able to write, a blessing through that, or by drawing it there, drawing a picture. There's different ways that every person of every age and ability can find a role in what we're doing and what we're creating together. And finding ways to share experiences together, creating new ones, finding ways to expand the ones we already have, whether that's decorating for our special times of year as a community, as a family, whether that's exploring nature. I love that there's a hiking program I have heard about. And our church recently, we have different small groups. One of the small groups decided to make their group, like a hiking group. And so not every activity will work for every person, but the more we have those different kinds of varied experiences, the walking and the talking is what this group was doing. My daughter might not be able to participate as much in the talking right now, but she could find her role in the walking and in the being together and being part of our group. And so we haven't done that, but I love that idea. And I think when churches begin to think creatively about supporting individuals, I feel like there's so many people who want to help, who want to connect, who really have a desire to include every person, truly. And so then it begins to be about how, and the practical how. I think that's sometimes where we can easily feel bogged down, because it's so individual, person to person, place to place. But that doesn't mean it's not worth endeavoring. It's not worth the doing, right? And worth the journey of talking together. And sometimes I think too, churches can become aware of how, milestones sometimes can be age graded, or they can be specific to, the traditional typical milestones might not be a milestone accessible to every person. That doesn't mean that person doesn't have their own personal milestones that are meaningful. And so can we open up our minds to, the uniqueness of every person's developmental process and share in and celebrate those moments of growth and milestone, even if they might look a little different or feel a little different? Can we have those alternate experiences of celebration? And I think we can. I think that can be really powerful as we're in the lives of each other and witnessing each other's lives and participating together. And I think too that, we think change can be really challenging for lots of people in our communities. So when we have change and I think a healthy community is always evolving. There's always variation and change, but also hopefully there are things that we can spotlight that are going to be the same, that are going to be consistent. And so if we can spotlight those things in those moments of change, okay, these things may have some variation, but these things you can count on about who we are as a community, and spotlight those things. I think that can create a sense of safety for all of us. And then also helping our change to be incremental, and so that it's small changes over time rather than one big shocking change that can be disoriented to lots of members. And I think that's
Right.
a challenge for any community, is the speed of change, the pace of change. But I think those are things, Brooke, that I hope it might be worthwhile to brainstorm with churches about the ways that their unique community can be served and move toward a greater inclusiveness and greater participation of every member of every age and ability.
That's beautiful. I love it. I think it's so important. And I want to make sure that churches have the opportunity to know where to find you, and for families as well, because you are offering RDI support to families and then also to churches. So let's take a minute to have you share where's the best way to reach you and how can people find you?
Oh, I appreciate that so much. Well, I'm happy for people to shoot me an email if they have. I would love to talk more if people have ideas and thoughts to share, comments, but my email address is lisa@lisadmaloney.com. You can find me on my website, lisadmaloney.com. That's D as in Delta. And so either of those two places, I have, a way to contact me either way. And I'm just delighted to continue this conversation with anyone who would like to talk more about it, as I do think it is so close to our hearts and our family.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. I really appreciate you being here today and sharing. And I think what you're doing and your approach to this is really meaningful. And I think it can, really help our listeners get some ideas and some inspiration and some hope too, that if they're feeling like they are longing for that community, but they're not having it, the way that they would like to, or they're not sure even how to approach it, just to take that one next step, right? Just like you mentioned, it's just one small step, and know that it's possible, and they can
And then
get
it's a
there.
process too, don't you think?
Absolutely. It is a process, and that's okay. It could be a slow process, and that's okay. As long as you're just keep moving forward one step at a time.
That's right. When we all have a unique pace that works best for us, and that's okay too.
Right.
So.
That's right. Well, thank you so much. I'm so grateful for our conversation, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Me too. Thank you, Brooke. My pleasure.
I'm dancing on the edge again. The wind is calling my name. I'm dancing on the edge again. This time I'm not looking back, babe. You can change me, you can tell me down. I'll leave echoes in every place I fly. I break the mold with rebels run. I'm a hurricane of free, born mine.
The information provided on this podcast is for general informational purposes only. The content shared is based on the experiences, opinions, and perspectives of the hosts and their guests and should not be construed as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. The discussions and topics covered are intended to foster understanding and awareness of autism therapies, but are not a substitute for professional medical guidance. Before making any decisions regarding therapies or treatments, we strongly encourage you to consult with a qualified healthcare provider who can provide personalized recommendations based on your unique circumstances. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree that the hosts, guests, and producers are not responsible for any consequences, damages, or outcomes arising from the use or application of any information during the show.